So good afternoon and welcome to this session on innovation. First, I wanted to say to everybody, welcome. Welcome to Detroit. And although this wasn't originally the intent, because of the change in venue, you're actually in the building that is also General Motors World Headquarters. So welcome to our World Headquarters as well. On the theme of innovation, and I guess first I should introduce myself. I'm Mike Abelson, Vice President inside of the Electric Vehicle Group for General Motors. And my area that I spend the most time on is actually electric vehicle infrastructure and charging, which brings me into contact with many of the various city governments on how do we make this future happen. More specifically on innovation, as I was thinking about the challenges our industry sees, I think what we see you can generalize to a lot of problems that cities are facing. Mary Barra, who you may have seen just before lunch in the plenary session, has said we expect more change in our industry in the next 5 years than we've seen in the last 50. And we don't say that lightly. And the change is being driven by a variety of technology developments, primarily connectivity, electrification, sharing, and finally the current media darling, autonomous. But the reason I think that what we're thinking about inside the industry may generalize to more of the challenges facing cities, what we've been working hard at with autonomous and electrification and connectivity is trying to work with cities and understand what outcomes do they want to make happen. Because cities have a variety of challenges, and vehicles can certainly evolve in a way, and transportation can evolve in a way that solves many of these problems, but it's not a given. It requires a conversation. It requires us to be aware of what outcomes cities are interested in, where they want to go. It's enabled by technology, but it's not all about technology. And I think that's, as I say, probably true for many of the issues that cities are facing. Technology will be one of the enablers, but just letting technology proceed to whatever end goal the people in charge of the technology see may not be the best answer for the city. So I'm very much looking forward to this session, very much looking forward to hearing what the panel has to say. And with that, I'll hand it over to Andrea as the moderator. Thank you very much.
Hello? Yes. Okay, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session on city innovation and a conversation with OECD champion mayors. I'm not yet Andrea. She's going to moderate some part of the session. My name is Lamia Kamal-Chaoui, and I lead the OECD work on regions, cities, entrepreneurship, and small businesses. For those who may not know the OECD, it's an intergovernmental organization that comprises 30 countries, advanced economies and emerging market economies, that was created after the Second World War to implement the Marshall Plan. It has evolved over time to become the primary hub of globalization for government. What do we do actually? We are supporting government. We produce harmonized international statistics in nearly every policy domain. We provide neutral evidence-based policy advice, and we also facilitate policy dialogue among governments at all levels of government. But while our constituency is mainly national government, we are also working with mayors and local leaders. So a few years ago, with Mayor Anne Hidalgo of Paris and Mayor de Blasio of New York, we launched a global coalition of 50 mayors from around the world We have 10 US mayors, actually, that are taking part of this global coalition, including New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Denver, San Jose. We have the mayor of San Jose with us today. Santa Monica, Philadelphia, Oakland. We have also in the room the mayor of Braga from Portugal. And actually, this champion mayor, they share good practices and make joint commitment to advance inclusive growth in all policy areas. We will be hearing from them, two of them in a moment. So, in this session, in addition to the first-hand experiences of mayors, we will also share with you findings from a pilot global survey of innovation capacity in cities. This survey was jointly developed by the OECD and Bloomberg Philanthropies to better understand the mechanics of innovation within municipal governments. And I would like to express my gratitude to Bloomberg Philanthropies and especially to James Anderson for this wonderful partnership. So what is this survey about? Concretely, it captures 5 dimensions of public sector innovation in cities, including innovation goals, organizational structure, funding, data, and outcomes. So in this session, we will take a close look at the following questions. Why and how cities are developing their innovation capacity, how they are paying for it, and how they are measuring the impact of their effort. But before, let me tell you about the survey sample. You can see in the screen that we have interviewed 89 cities of all sizes and from around the world. They completed the survey and they are mentioned here. That you can see them there in green on the map. The cities range in size from Chelsea, Massachusetts with 40,000 inhabitants to São Paulo, Brazil with over 12 million inhabitants. In terms of geographic coverage, 64% of respondents were from the United States and Canada, followed by European cities representing 18% of the total. In future work, we are planning to expand the geographic coverage to include more cities outside the United States. So now let's start our conversation with a fundamental question. What is public sector innovation helping cities do better? When we ask the 89 cities to tell us the top 3 outcomes they were achieving through their innovation work, they said improving internal government operations, improving service delivery, and improving resident outcomes. But now I would like to stop because I would like us to hear more from our 2 champion mayors. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome our first OECD champion mayor, Giorgos Kaminis from Athens, Greece. He's going to be the next host of the Champion Mayor Summit in March. And also, I'm very pleased to introduce the other champion mayor, Sam Liccardo from San Jose, California, United States. And finally, I'm also very pleased to introduce our partner and friends, Andrea Coleman, from Bloomberg Philanthropies, who will moderate this discussion between the 2 mayors. Please.
I'm sure.
I'll try this one. Thanks, Lamia. Mayor Liccardo, Mayor Kaminis, it's such a pleasure to be here. Bloomberg Philanthropies and Bloomberg Associates are working with your cities in a number of ways, and I'm familiar with a lot of the creative approaches that you're promoting on the ground, so really excited for this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. As Lamia just noted, her research pointed to the top 3 ways that cities have reported that innovation is helping them to improve life for residents. Mayor Liccardo, does that resonate? And why are you investing in innovation capacity in San Jose?
Me either, so I may steal your key.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Do a handoff.
You can have the dead one if that works. I think we'll just share mics. You know, it does resonate with me. I think there's an underlying. There may be an underlying impetus for many of our cities, and that is scarcity. We recognize there's never enough money, there are never enough resources, there's never enough staff to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And we're increasingly recognizing the benefits of data and technology and improving performance. In the case of San Jose, I came into office just after the Great Recession, and we lost about a third of our workforce. We still have the most thinly staffed city hall of any major city in the United States. And so we had to figure out how we could essentially deliver services that our residents reasonably expected with fewer resources than anyone should have in delivering those those services. And so that impetus certainly led us to be much more external facing in terms of how we viewed how to deliver services. We knew we needed more partnerships. We needed to be talking to the innovative community all around us in Silicon Valley. We needed to be talking to philanthropy and see how we could start to innovate because doing the same thing the same way wouldn't work for us. I think, by the way, that's true certainly in the United States for any city, and virtually every city is facing rising pension costs, rising infrastructure debt. This is just the reality that we're all facing. And so we have to innovate or die. And I think the good news is I think most mayors are seeing the benefits of innovating. In terms of service delivery and improving how we're doing things, particularly the use of data has been very compelling for us in justifying how we make these investments in technology and data. As we think, for example, about serving residents in times of scarcity, one of the first things you cut in a city when you have to cut positions, it's things like code enforcement. And yet, inevitably there are safety impacts, and we were seeing increases in fires in many multifamily developments, apartments, predominantly in low-income communities. And so we are using better data increasingly in the last year to help us develop algorithms to help us anticipate where the least safe buildings are, so that way we could get out there with code enforcement and anticipate the safety challenges and be more effective with the time we're using inspecting buildings, getting them up to code.
Thank you. Mayor Kaminis, I know that in Athens, you've formalized the city's innovation capacity in a number of ways, including creating a recently new position of Vice Mayor on Innovation. What does that allow you to do differently?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Having the opportunity to speak about Athens in Detroit. So it helped us. We create, this Vice Mayor for Innovation, especially social innovation. That's what we have tried to do. Why? Because we want to leave a legacy afterwards. So creating a structure, a permanent structure on innovation, you create, let's say, an innovation resiliency in the city's administration, a legacy when we leave the administration. So social innovation, we have to think about Athens in 2011. When I took office, it was a situation of perfect storm. There was a global, a multidimensional crisis, not only a financial crisis, political, social, and even moral crisis. And we had to find ways to do things in a different way. So people were there, citizens were there, and we had to rebuild confidence and trust with citizens because of the crisis they had lost every confidence to the system. So we politicians, we mayors, we say that we want citizens to trust us, and we're looking for this trust. Now it should, in a first phase, go the other way around. We found out that we should give trust to the citizens, because during those days of the crisis, we found out that many grassroots groups were popping up in the city, trying to do things, trying to fill the void that was left by the central government. So we connected with those groups, and through a platform that we created, the Synathina platform, we had they're participating little by little, more than 400 groups in this platform, bringing people together, exchanging experiences and know-how. And this platform, we submitted as a project to the Mayor's Challenge in 2013. We won the second award, and now that is a certain legacy that we leave to the city of Athens, that we have built these very strong ties, very strong relations with the civil society. And one of the things that we have done is very, very large consultations of how, let's say, to not only to renovate buildings, but what would we do with those buildings? Large consultations, and we applied the decisions of the people.
Thank you.
There you go. There's one.
It's working. Now, a second.
It worked a second ago. Just now got it. Yeah.
Just hello.
This one.
Hello. Yes. Thank you very much, Andrea. Now that we have a better sense of what is motivating cities to innovate, I'd like to shift to how cities are approaching innovation. So concretely, what are they doing when they talk about building innovation capacity? As you can see from the web on the screen, among the 89 cities surveyed, you can see here, the most common activities were taking risks or testing new ideas, for instance, prototyping new programs or models to address a persistent city challenge, engaging residents in new ways, for instance, via digital technologies or co-creation, pursuing data-driven analytics and public data management, for instance, data storage, open data, big data, and facilitating organizational change within the municipality. I'm thinking here about breaking down silos or staff training and capacity building on innovation tools. So we also ask cities to tell us what are the terms they most associate with public sector innovation. And here they most commonly mention experimentation, human-centered design, data analytics, and big picture rethinking. So I must confess, when I saw the term human-centered design, I thought, what are they talking about? I understand we have an expert here in the audience who can help us to better understand what it means. Tracy Colunga, Chief Innovation Officer from the city of Long Beach, California. Tracy, can you tell us, if you have a microphone, in terms what we can all understand, what is a human-centered design approach, and can you give us an example of how you introduced this in Long Beach? You have 2 minutes, Tracy.
Oh, hi there. No? Okay, awesome. Maybe I should step back. The city of Long 2017, the mayor asked the city manager, chief of police, the innovation team to really look at the issue of public safety. What was driving the crime rates up in the city? And essentially what we did first is, like most good cities, we looked to the data, 5 years worth of police data. What were the types of crimes? Who were committing those crimes? What we found is that there was 875 people who were the top 5% of repeat offenders who were cycling in and out of jail. 85% of the crimes they were committing were misdemeanors. So to really understand, what was happening, this is where human-centered design comes in. We interviewed over 26 people who had been booked and cited over 11 times because we wanted to understand their experience. Both we asked them about the criminal justice system and how we could co-create a system that would meet their needs and people like themselves to break the cycle of incarceration. We learned a lot about that. We learned a lot about their experience and what we could co-create. We developed 6 initiatives. The one I want to highlight is we actually put a clinician in the jail. We learned from those interviews that many of them talked about jail and prison as being a place of respite. 3 meals a day, they could get a good night's sleep, get back on their medication if they were mentally ill. will get sobered up and have that aha moment. We have now placed a clinician in our jail for a pilot program as a prototype to see how they would respond. 85% of the people who they've seen have said yes to services and have a post-release plan to get connected to substance abuse treatment, again, getting them back on their medication or into housing if they're homeless. And we now have a post-release plan in hopes that we'll begin to break that cycle of incarceration based on the individual's feedback who've actually been in the system for many years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Andrea, let's hear again from the mayors.
Thank you. So in terms of innovation methods, Mayor Liccardo, I know you had just mentioned your focus on data analytics. When we think about San Jose, we often think about tech innovation and Silicon Valley being the heart of it. I know that you have a number of terrific industry partners as well in your city. How do you keep your innovation efforts focused on the human side of things and avoid being really tech-led in terms of your agenda?
I'll try yours. I think it is tempting for every mayor and every chief innovation officer in any city to be overwhelmed with a flood of requests from companies or partners who want you to try the latest. Thank you. Here we go, one more. We're going to invent a good microphone. There's a temptation just to chase the latest shiny object in tech, and we know that's a huge temptation for a lot of cities because we get flooded with a lot of requests in various ways. And I think that the pattern I think that many of us had a few years ago of sort of believing that somehow or another, whatever emerged from the latest effort to crunch data must be a solution we can implement. It was probably not a great one for us. It was probably more important for us to really define clearly our objectives first. And with our smart city vision in San Jose, we really clearly define whatever we're going to be taking on has to have a clear outcome benefit for our residents around just a very small set of ambitions, and that is around improving equity, improving safety, improving mobility, and improving sustainability. If it doesn't fit in that, then it's not worth doing. And so that helps us at least focus our efforts. And then, building really on Tracy's point about human-centered design, so critically important for us to actually ask our residents how they believe they can be helped by technology or not before we decide we're here to help them. When we decided that we wanted to take on the digital divide, which I know is something that is a huge challenge for many cities in the United States, in San Jose we have more than 100,000 people, we think, who have little or no access at all to the internet in the heart of Silicon Valley. We actually did on-the-street surveys, and we asked an awful lot of non-English speaking residents as well as digital natives what obstacles they had to be able to get online and using the digital tools that we had in the city. And it wasn't always the obvious answer. Obviously, there are challenges with regard to getting broadband out there and the cost of it and so forth, but often there are emotional issues or concerns about the safety of the internet, and parents had real concerns about their kids being online, even though they knew ultimately their teachers were demanding they be online just to complete their homework. And so it's really critical for us to understand those concerns from the individual before we go out there and try to fix it. So recently when we launched our latest iteration of our smartphone app to help folks be able to identify the problems in the city and the street lights that are missing and the trash that's dumped that needs to be picked up. It was important for us to do a lot of beta testing with users to make sure that we had the design that was logical to them to help them navigate and to make it as simple as possible, regardless of the fact that many of our residents may be coming from another part of the world. 40% of us were immigrants in San Jose. And so really starting with the user has been critical for us.
Thanks. Mayor Kaminis, demographic change is a major challenge, and Athens has been at the heart of a refugee and migrant crisis. Can you talk about how the social innovation methods that you mentioned are helping you develop responses with the migrant communities rather than for migrant communities in Athens?
So in 2015, the summer of 2015, we had this phenomenon of massive arrivals of refugees in Athens. And we had those people living in parks, public squares. It was the month of August, vacations, everyone was absent. So we had to take very quick decisions. First of all, to offer land to create the first refugee camp. And that was not so easy because we have this NMIB approach, not in my backyard approach. Yes, it's very common, so we had to give the example. But then we realized that we had to work together with the society. And I mean, first of all, there are international organizations specialized on dealing with those issues. We brought many of them in Athens, like the IRC, International Rescue Committee, the Red Cross, and of course, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees was there. So there were philanthropic organizations ready to contribute, grassroots organizations, and what we did, we created a coordination center in Athens with a donation from the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, where we had, and they are still there, 85 organizations, public and private, coordinating them, learning what's going on with the refugee issue. And then we are prepared a proposal to the European Union for the integration of those people. Now, the major problem is that most of those people, according to a survey that we made, they don't want to stay in Greece. For many reasons, but mainly because of the economic crisis, they can't find any jobs. And the second thing is that many of them have relatives or friends in other European countries, but they are stranded in the country, and we have to deal with that. So we prepared a project that we submitted to the European Union, and it has been funded with 5 million euros on working together with the academia, with NGOs in the city, and try to motivate those people. We have, they are in a limbo situation because they do nothing, they don't know the language, so they have to learn the language, they have to be motivated. So there is a project of them contributing together with NGOs, with neighborhood organizations, doing things for the city, gaining skills or upgrading their own skills. And so there is, afterwards, they will be offered a house. And little by little, let's hope that those people will get integrated, because there is also the language problem. It's a big barrier for them to learn Greek.
Okay, so now that we know why cities are developing innovation capacity and that we have a better sense of what kinds of activities they are doing, the $1 million question, who is paying for it? So, among the 89 cities, we found that more than 3/4 of respondents have dedicated funding to support innovation capacity. And this share is roughly the same everywhere among cities in our sample, as you can see on the screen. But where does the funding come from? The most common funding source by far remains the municipal budget. 94% of cities have dedicated at least some of their municipal budget to support innovation capacity. The second most common source of funding is external, non-public, with 44% of cities indicating that they receive external funding for innovation. But while more than 90% of all cities have funding from their municipal budget, there are some interesting regional differences. Indeed, outside US and Canada, typically a larger share of cities receive funding from the national government, whilst non-public funding is more prevalent in US and Canada than elsewhere. There, 93% of non-public funding comes from philanthropic organizations. In Europe, we really don't have the philanthropic organization. It's mainly the state that is really funding instead of this type of organization. But let's hear more from our mayors on this aspect of funding. Andrea.
Thanks. Mayor Kaminis, probably more than many cities, Athens has faced severe fiscal constraints. We saw the statistic there about the high percentage of cities that are using municipal budgets to fund innovation. In Athens, you had to find your own creative ways of doing that. One of those includes the Athens Partnership, which I believe has raised over 12 million euros in the last 2 years to help support those efforts. We know that developing those kinds of partnerships can bring in funding, can bring in new forms of expertise to cities, but it's also a lot of work to develop and maintain partnerships. Do you have advice for cities about how to make the most of those external partnerships and how to leverage external resources for their cities?
Yes, thank you. This kind of public-private partnership was an idea given to us by Bloomberg Associates. Now, Bloomberg Associates have been working together with us. That's a kind of funding, a pro bono consultation procedure and mentoring from Bloomberg Associates on many fields in Athens concerning culture, tourism, digital economy, things like that. So the Athens partnership is a private-public entity, non-profit, that receives donations and prepares projects for the city, piloting innovative projects. And it helped us a lot, to bypass these very heavy bureaucratic procedures that we still have, unfortunately, in Greece, and is one of the main reasons of the country going default. So through those partnerships, you can do many things. And we had those very severe crisis in 2015 with capital controls. The banks closed. So thanks to this generous donation from the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, we received the first seed money for the partnership. And after that, through transparency, we managed to bring more and more money to the city. But we have brought to the city also European funding. It's a highly competitive procedure to bring European funds, European structural funds, as they have called. Until now, we have brought 150 million euros. That is a legacy for the city. So we have not raised taxes at all. Now we are lowering taxes for the business, and we are creating jobs. We have tourism now that goes very well in Athens, and we are very optimistic.
Thank you. That's an incredible story that you can be lowering taxes at this point in Athens. So congratulations on the progress that you've made there. Mayor Liccardo, San Jose is a city that commits municipal funds to innovation. How do you convince the public when there are probably some people who would say, that's a nice to have, but not an essential service?
It's a great question. Before I answer that question, I should say, it's important to recognize the resources you have even before you start throwing money into it. We had a workforce that had a lot of pent-up desire to be able to deploy technology, to be able to work with data, to improve services. They wanted to see it happen. And so being able to leverage what we had just from folks who were willing to put in a little extra time on the side or on a Saturday was very helpful, in addition to obviously leveraging the very creative and innovative community that we happen to be in. In terms of dedicating the public dollars, I think it's critical to be able to make the use case that shows everybody how you can save money and improve service with the pilot with the individual point on the data map. So for us, it was a couple of early initiatives we started with the help of What Works Cities at Bloomberg, being able to show, for example, how we could improve park maintenance by better utilizing data to allocate our resources, how we could improve or reduce costs in our police department, better utilizing the fleet, again, with data analytics. And so once you're able to establish that, there's a lot more, certainly internal buy-in of folks who say, yeah, this is worth spending money on because we're actually saving money and improving results. And that starts to build momentum both internally and externally. And then, of course, the next step, I think, is, as Mayor Kaminis described, is really building those partnerships. The partnerships are critical, but we know that that help is usually one-time and finite. Obviously, there are great organizations like Bloomberg, but you can't rely on those dollars as you're building staff. That's really got to be something you commit internally. But the partnerships can be essential. And for us, it's taken a lot of different forms. We really put ourselves out there as a city, as a demonstration city, for companies that wanted to simply test and use us as their, for lack of a better term, guinea pig. And we were willing to do it because we're only picking those technologies we think that have some clear benefit for our residents. So Facebook tried a gigabit speed Wi-Fi service in our downtown core called Terragraph. And so, again, the resources were theirs. We simply made our city available to them. Similarly, Airbnb, after we had a pretty devastating flood last year, came into our city and said, hey, let's pilot a program where we can actually use our platform to get more folks opening up their homes in times of natural disaster to families in need. And so we just launched that a few weeks ago. It doesn't take significant municipal resources. It takes partners who are willing to trust you, and it takes your openness to allowing your city to be tested.
Thank you. And I think we're fortunate to have in the audience someone who knows a lot about how cities around the world are creatively funding their innovation efforts. George McCarthy is president and CEO of the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. And we'd love to hear from you. In particular, what are some of the most successful ways that cities are leveraging underexploited assets in order to fund their innovation efforts?
I hope this works. Oh, good. It does. Oh, maybe it doesn't. So thank you. I'd just like to give 3 examples from Detroit as a way to suggest ways that you can deploy underused assets. But this really applies to lots and lots of cities around the world. And so in the first case, you really need a partnership with philanthropy and the public sector to kind of make things work. And the partnership with philanthropy isn't just about money, but it is about money. It's about money and other things. It's about money, it's about ideas, and it's usually about staffing. And so in the case of Detroit, the city of Detroit, before the bankruptcy, was leaving about $100 million a year on the table of federal money that was earmarked through formula funding that they weren't spending. And one of the reasons they weren't spending it is because they'd lost so much of their capacity in the public sector side that they couldn't really comply with all the requirements of the 1,700 different federal grants programs that they were trying to comply with. And so they just left the money on the table. So with the help of the Ford Foundation and the Kresge Foundation, we teamed up with the emergency financial manager to say, what if we help to set up a centralized grants management system for the city of Detroit, who could then endure the brain damage of trying to work with these 1,700 different grants programs and help the city to then use the money and then also to comply. And over the course of about 3 years, Kresge and Ford invested about $4 million. The emergency financial manager set aside some money for a new IT system. And within 3 years, Detroit was using all of its money. $100 million more of federal money was flowing into Detroit. And this is a city that had a budget of about $1 billion a year. So that was like 10% of the budget, which was meaningful. So for a small investment, $4 million from philanthropy, to then trigger $100 million of federal funds. And as it turns out, we've done surveys now since then of many cities around the U.S. and around the world, and the intergovernmental transfer systems are not very efficient anywhere, and most local governments leave a lot of money on the table unbeknownst to their voters, which is probably good for their local governments. So the other thing is one of the things about Detroit, it's a city that was actually built on innovation and entrepreneurship, except it was innovation and entrepreneurship in one industry. And so philanthropy was able to, with the help of the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan, pool together with more than a dozen major philanthropies $100 million to initiate a 10-year program to build a new culture of innovation and entrepreneurship in Detroit, which is really focused around small business generation. And was also focused around not just the training and the technical assistance to create the small businesses, but sometimes meaningful equity investments, which is something that small businesses need to kind of get off the ground. And over a 10-year period, hundreds and hundreds of businesses were started, and then in 2015, the foundation's re-upped with another $25 million to continue that program. And then finally, we surveyed a lot of these small businesses to ask them, what are the obstacles that are making it hard for you to start a new business in Detroit? And one of the big obstacles was that it took 120 days to get a certificate of occupancy when they wanted to open a new business and had found a new site to do their work. And so with the help of Living Cities, the Ford Foundation, and Kresge, we actually placed 2 full-time employees inside city government to do process tracking to figure out why it was taking so long to get a certificate of occupancy. And within a year, it had fallen from 120 days to 50 days. And then when Mike Duggan came into office, he pledged to bring it down to 5 days by the time he was through. And I don't know what it is today, but I know that it's now just a matter of weeks and not a matter of months to get a COO, which is what you need to do business. You can't wait for 3 months to start doing business once you're ready to do business. So those kinds of partnerships with philanthropy, it's both the ideas, it's the investment, it's sometimes taking the risk, but it's a bunch of different things that then leverage other resources from the outside, and much like the way the city of Athens was able to leverage EU money that came in as a result of becoming more competitive.
Thank you very much, Mac. I just want to say that Mac actually is now the CEO of Lincoln, and Lincoln is a partner institution of the Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth. But he was with us when we launched the initiative. He was at the Ford Foundation. And it's partly thanks to him that, this Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth initiative exists today. We are now, and I see Sena that is showing me the time, in our final round of questions. Michael Bloomberg, he always said, if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. Measurement is at the core of the OECD work. So the question here is, are cities measuring impact of their innovation effort? And if so, how are they doing it? So in the survey, we found that a little over half of cities with innovation goals felt that they were doing well or so-so, while almost 1/3 said it's too soon to tell. So we asked cities to tell us all relevant outcomes they were measuring, and the top 3 are resident engagement and sense of community, quality and accessibility of public services, and economic development. But we still need a lot more progress when it comes to measurement. Indeed, only 16% of cities surveyed conduct a comprehensive and systematic evaluation of the impacts of their innovation strategy. The city of Syracuse, New York, is one of them. I would like to invite Adria Finch, Chief Innovation Officer, to tell us how Syracuse has strengthened its approach to measurement. Please, Adria, 2 minutes for you.
So in Syracuse, we do a few different things. One, when we do develop innovative initiatives, we always measure the effectiveness of those through regularly occurring meetings with the mayor. But we also recently kind of pivoted so that we're now also doing holistic innovation. So the way we do this is the mayor has identified 4 specific objectives that he wants to accomplish. And each of those objectives have been assigned to a different senior staff member. So each senior staff member owns a different objective. And they work with their portfolio to identify specific key results or sub-goals that we then measure to ensure that we're driving progress towards that. And this is important for a few different reasons. First, we measure these during our department head meetings. So once a week, a different senior staff member is presenting the progress that they're making towards the mayor's goals. But by doing this in the department head meetings, a few things happen. We increase accountability because they're actually talking about the numbers and also engaging other people in the conversation about what they plan to do next. It also increases collaboration because you have these people who are in this room perhaps listening to goals about infrastructure who never would have thought about infrastructure before, and they actually add to the conversation, help with the brainstorming and use the data that's being presented in these meetings to drive innovative efforts and innovative ideas. And then third, we're able to be agile and we're able to adapt and evolve based upon the numbers that we're seeing. So this allows us to fail fast if we need to. It allows us to really ensure that we are seeing impact, and if not, then pivot. And just a quick example of how all of these things kind of come into practice. One of the mayor's objectives is to improve city services. And then one of the key results associated with that is to ensure that we're not going to the same addresses over and over again to do the same services. So how can we reduce these redundant efforts? And one of the metrics that is supporting that is reduce the number of times you're going to the same houses to deal with sewer backups. Now, historically, what we would have done is talked about this with the engineering department, public works, maybe the mayor in kind of a siloed environment. But now, by reviewing these numbers in the department head meeting, all of a sudden, other people are contributing to the conversation. The finance department's chirping in, and the commissioner of neighborhood development actually spoke up and said, hey, there is this grant opportunity that exists in the community that nobody takes advantage of, and it's specifically for sewer backups. So a really quick and dirty, easy innovation was getting a one-page handout about this grant program in the hands of the employees who are going out to actually take care of the sewer backups. And so really easy innovation. We're now measuring the impact, but in terms of being agile too, like once we start to see the improvements and the impact of this, we're able to then add new metrics or new key results that we want to measure that, again, relate back up to the overall objectives of the mayor. So really just ensuring that you are using the data to measure the impact, but then also drive the innovations. It's kind of this circle of life.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Liccardo, one last question for you on this topic, and then I think if we have time, we'll try to squeeze in one or two questions from the audience. So I guess same question regarding measuring the impact of innovation. You talked about investments, particularly now in your data analytics capabilities. What are the one or two or three things that you're looking at to know that it's worth the investment in having an impact?
I think, as we look at individual programs, for example, trying to improve emergency medical response from our fire department, we have very specific measures, obviously, a time measure, and ensuring that we are improving our response with particular technological investments like signal prioritization, for example. What I don't think we're doing a good job of, and now I think more about this, and as I'm listening, is I don't think we do that in a systemic way across the entire organization, and in terms of our broadest goals. And all too often, as I've sat in meetings before, and I know this is true in San Jose, and it's true in a lot of cities, we think about an awful lot of sort of output data rather than outcomes. And we use that to justify what we think are good programs just because the outputs are high, but not necessarily recognizing what impact it's having for the Spanish-speaking single mom with 2 kids who we really want to have an impact to help. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, certainly here in San Jose, or in my city, San Jose, but throughout the country. I think I would also add that as we think about metrics, the notion of community engagement, which I saw was one of the 3 items that showed up on the survey, is a really hard one to measure honestly, because I think too much in cities, we've got an echo chamber of digital natives who are responding to the online app, and they're using it. And so we get a lot of data and we think we're engaging a community, but the reality is there's a whole community that's not engaged. They're on the other side of the digital divide, and we're just hearing from the same folks. And so I think a lot more work needs to be done in this area.
Thank you. And that, I think, resonates with conversations, Mayor Kaminis, that we've had about your work in Athens. And sometimes it's tricky to measure the participation rates of residents. So maybe that's for the next CityLab. Thank you. We just have a couple of minutes left, but I was hoping to take questions from the audience, if there are any questions. I think we have no time at all. And so actually, hold on to those thoughts. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you to Lamia, Mayor Liccardo, Mayor Kaminis. Thank you.